So good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, the Chennai Center for China Studies, and the Press Institute of India, this is Sashi Nair extending to all of you a very warm welcome from a cyclone-buffeted, rain-drenched, tree-uprooted city. I'm glad to be here. I was wondering whether I could make it after yesterday's roaring winds, but finally we've made it. I'm particularly delighted to welcome two special guests this morning, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy and Admiral Sunil Lamba. Thank you very much, sirs, for sparing your time to be here. It means a lot to us, and we are privileged to have both of you here this morning. Today, we all know the subject. It's the third part of the Deciphering China series. The focus this time being on maritime context. This is a special day, a day that we can hardly forget. 12 years ago, on this day in 2008, Mumbai witnessed a series of terrorist attacks when 10 members of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, an extremist Islamist organization based in Pakistan, carried out 12 coordinated shooting and bombing attacks, lasting 4 days across the city. More than 170 people are said to have died and more than 300 reported wounded. We can never ever forget the horror of 26/11, but let us also always remember the heroes who died in action, people like Hemant Karkare, Ashok Kamte, Inspector Vijay Salaskar, ASI Umbale, Police Inspector Shashank Shinde, Constable Lambadas Ramchandra Pawar, and NSG Commandos Major Sandeep Unnikrishnan and Havildar Gajinder Singh Bisht. Not to forget many other heroes who were seriously injured, including, of course, very brave civilians. We are proud of them, and to them all we owe an eternal debt. Let us, I request you, this morning, observe a minute's silence to remember their sacrifices and also as a mark of respect. Thank you, everyone. Just for the benefit of those who are gathered here, who especially Ambassador Sujan Chinoy and Admiral Lamba, the Press Institute of India is an independent non-profit organization. It's not a think tank as such, but it was established in 1963 by some of India's leading news publishing houses to create and sustain high and responsible standards of journalism, something we don't see often today. Of course, we conduct several programs, and one of the focus areas the past 10 years or so, ever since we bonded with ICSB and C3S, has been national security and foreign policy. I'm delighted to invite Ambassador Sujan Chinoy to deliver the inaugural address. But before he does so, let me briefly introduce him. Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, an expert on China, Japan, and national security issues, is Director General of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi, a career diplomat of the Indian Foreign Service from 1981 to 2018. He was India's ambassador to Japan from 2015 to 2018, and earlier the ambassador to Mexico. A specialist with over 25 years of experience on East Asia and the Asia Pacific, he has served in Indian missions in Hong Kong and Beijing and as Consul General in Shanghai and Sydney. He also served as India's representative to the First Committee at the United Nations in New York, dealing with disarmament and international security affairs, and as political counselor in the Indian mission in Riyadh. At headquarters in the Ministry of External Affairs, Ambassador Chinoy was Director China, as well as head of the expert security group of diplomatic and military officials tasked with confidence-building measures and boundary-related issues with China for 4 years. He was also the desk officer for the US and Canada and officer on special duty in charge of press relations in the External Publicity Division. On deputation for 4 years with the National Security Council Secretariat under the Prime Minister's office, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy has worked extensively on internal and external national security policy and anchored strategic dialogues with key interlocutors around the world. He is fluent in English and Chinese, Mandarin, and conversant in French, Spanish, German, Japanese, Arabic, Urdu, and French Creole. Pleasure to have you, sir. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that very generous introduction. I have learned a great deal about myself this morning through you. Mr. Shashi Nair, Director, Press Institute of India in Chennai, Admiral Sunil Lamba, Chairman of the National Maritime Foundation, Commodore R.S. Vasan, Director of the Chennai Center for China Studies, better known as C3S, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am perhaps the only one this morning who's wearing a naval tie and doing his best to look like an old sea dog. And I think I have succeeded in that particular endeavor. I'm very grateful, ladies and gentlemen, to the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, Chennai Center for China Studies, and the Press Institute of India for inviting me to deliver the inaugural address on the theme of Deciphering China, the Maritime Context. As you all know, today the world is undergoing a fundamental transformation. A fragile international compact has been further weakened by the COVID-19 pandemic. The priority in every country is to contain the pandemic and stimulate economic recovery. Yet, amidst unprecedented change in a world in flux, this fateful day of the 26th of November is accompanied by keen remembrance for all those who lost their lives in the gruesome terrorist attacks on Mumbai by sea-borne terrorists from Pakistan. This heart-wrenching anniversary reminds us that terrorism remains one of the greatest threats to peace and progress everywhere. It also reminds us that India's vast coastline and the seas beyond are so very important to our national security. Friends, today, under the overhang of great uncertainty, international relations are increasingly characterized by a proclivity to weaponize trade and technology. There is little doubt that the world is rapidly cleaving itself into mutually exclusive camps, especially in 5G and artificial intelligence. Overall, power is fractured, hedging and multi-alignment are part of every country's strategic toolkit. Even before the politics of the pandemic took center stage, the US-China trade war had been hugely disruptive. Efforts at decoupling from excessive reliance on tenuous and exploitative trade ties will continue, and building alternative and resilient supply chains are key objectives for many a nation. But all this will take time. In our part of the world, China's rise has not been smooth. The West took 150 years to achieve an enduring balance of power through a long process of industrialization, war, and multiple treaties to forge peace. In China's case, change has been so rapid that it is not just the outside world that has found it difficult to adjust to China's rise. China itself seems quite unprepared to accurately comprehend the implications of such fundamental changes in its power and influence. China expects the entire world to adjust to the accretion in its economic and military heft. However, in its haste to scale to the top, it is quite unwilling to acknowledge the achievements or accommodate the aspirations of other countries, especially democracies that offer an alternative model to China's centralized authoritarian systems of growth and governance. It is also perhaps overreaching, in my view. China aims to become a moderately developed country by 2021, that is the centenary of the Chinese Communist Party's establishment. Furthermore, it seeks to modernize its military forces by 2035 and to realize the China dream, that is the emergence of a strong, modern, and rejuvenated Chinese nation by 2050. The party's mantra of community of a shared future for mankind seems an ill-concealed effort to reinvent the Middle Kingdom, with China at the center of a new world order. Policies such as Made in China 2025 and the creation of vast physical and digital infrastructure networks linking China's manufacturing nodes with global markets through the Belt and Road Initiative are part of the stratagem. China's rise reminds one at once of the experience of the colonial powers and later the reactions against Wilhelmine Germany and Imperial Japan. In the past, colonial powers such as the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British were motivated to acquire extraterritorial privileges and to consolidate their presence using mare liberum and mare clausum strategies in the Indian Ocean. These privileges enabled the colonial powers to secure trading rights and monopolies over raw materials for manufacturing centers back home and markets for finished products. Today, China appears to be driven by similar neo-colonial considerations through the twin prongs of the Belt and Road Initiative, that is, the Continental Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. Friends, historically, China was primarily a landward-oriented power, except for the short interlude during the Ming Dynasty marked by the voyages of Admiral Zheng He in the opening decades of the 15th century. However, within 100 years of Zheng He, the Ming emperors had abandoned their naval fleet and left it to rot, apparently out of concern at the implications of global trade, the change in China that it was bound to bring about, and the rise of a merchant community in China. For the next 200 years, China retreated into a shell, just as the European powers were hitting their stride and exploiting an industrial revolution backed by endless supply chains extending to their colonies. As successor to the Ming, the Qing dynasty was obsessed with the expansion of its continental power. It undertook territorial campaigns in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Mongolia. The Qing's limited experience with naval power was not exactly an exhilarating experience. It was marked by a major land-sea defeat at the hands of Japan in 1895, resulting in the Treaty of Shimonoseki and the loss of Taiwan, Penghu, and the Liaotung Peninsula. It also resulted in a loss of influence in the Korean Peninsula. Friends, some of the earliest military engagements that the People's Republic of China entered into after its formation in 1949 were continental in nature. Many were aimed at gaining control over a periphery that China had long coveted. This included the Korean War between 1950 and 53, China's assistance to the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War in the 1960s and early 70s, the border conflict with India in 1962, and the invasion of Vietnam in 1979. This is not to say, however, that the People's Republic of China did not give thought to maritime issues. In fact, it inherited all the maritime territorial ambitions and claims of the Republic of China, just as it did its specious continental claims. Traditionally, the PRC and Taiwan both had identical revanchist claims over the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea and over the disputed islands, rocks, and natural features in the South China Sea. But until recently, the People's Republic did not have the capacity to assert itself. All this has now changed. After the September 2001 attacks, the US's priority shifted, as you all know, to the war on international terror. It left a vacuum in the Asia Pacific, which was systematically exploited by China. Simultaneously, China has used the last 2 decades to transform its brown water navy into a blue water navy. China's naval modernization has enabled it to expand its focus and area of operations from its near sea to the far seas. China believes that a strong, powerful, and modern blue water navy is a key instrument in the realization of the China dream of national rejuvenation. Accretion in naval power has allowed China to significantly ramp up its presence in the Indian Ocean, where no less than 32 task forces have rotated over the past decade under one pretext or the other. China has also tried to promote the Arctic Silk Road by declaring itself as a near Arctic state in 2018. Today, China remains one of the fastest growing navies in the world. In sheer numbers, it is also the largest navy, having overtaken the formidable US Navy. Even with a surge in Chinese naval capabilities, the US Navy, as well as the navies of several other countries, including Japan, remain well ahead in terms of sophistication. US carrier battle groups are far more numerous. Its aircraft carriers are at least twice the size of China's nascent aircraft carriers and far more advanced. China may not yet be a peer of the United States in naval power, but it has certainly sought to bridge the gap through asymmetrical means by developing anti-access, area denial strategies, anti-ship and carrier killer missiles, and by developing capacities to target space-based ISR assets of the adversary. In recent years, there has been a fresh spurt in US naval commitment to the region. It is reflected in the renaming of its Pacific Command from PACOM to Indo-US PACOM, Indo-Pacific PACOM. Indo-US PACOM. The outgoing US Navy Secretary Kenneth Braithwaite has announced that the Navy should create a new fleet within the Indo-Pacific theater to take some measures and to take pressure off the 7th Fleet. Under a Biden administration, the US should work to strengthen its alliance partnerships in the region. Today, it is China's own actions that are defining the evolving strategic geography of the Indo-Pacific. The Belt and Road Initiative, debt trap diplomacy with island nations, China's fictitious territorial claims, an island grabbing spree in the South China Sea, its quest for ports and basing rights along the Indian Ocean littoral, and a divide and rule stratagem in Southeast Asia and South Asia are actively shaping the contours of the Indo-Pacific vision of many countries. Effectively, one can say that it is China's actions that are giving a sense of purpose and direction to the quadrilateral security dialogue. A fundamental fact of the last 2 decades is that an ambitious China has been virtually seeking the expulsion of the United States and other major powers from its periphery. This has huge implications for the region's peace, security, and prosperity. China has long regarded US presence in the Asia Pacific as an impediment to its domination of Asia. This is ironic because the US and others, such as France and Britain, have historically been part of the region. And the US has been a key factor in the region's economic prosperity and political stability after the end of the Second World War, including China's prosperity. Other European powers, such as Germany, which are showing interest in an open and transparent rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific, also have deep stakes and are integral to the region's future. We must welcome them. This naturally grates against China's narrow definition of Asia for Asians, which is a China-centric concept that excludes several genuine stakeholders who have long-standing interests in the region. For India, China's growing forays and presence in the Indian Ocean region are certainly a matter of growing concern. China's disruptive forays in Sri Lanka and the Maldives, and the growing area of operations of Chinese submarines, its deep seabed mining in the central Indian Ocean, its efforts to acquire operational turnaround and berthing facilities from Hambantota to Gwadar to Djibouti are all matters of concern. Of course, China has a right to engage in normal activity in the region, just like all others. However, it is the lack of transparency and China's opaque motives that lead to apprehensions. It is difficult for China to convince the world that its objectives are anodyne when it deploys submarines in the Indian Ocean on the pretext of conducting anti-piracy operations and attempts to take over ports through debt trap diplomacy. In the South China Sea, the sharpening regional geopolitical contestations are reflected in China's preposterous claims and the building and militarization of islands. China has consistently sought to fracture ASEAN consensus on its periphery and to manipulate the outcomes in the code of conduct that is still under negotiation. China is a member of UNCLOS, yet engages in activities that violate the sanctity of UNCLOS. It has refused to accept UNCLOS rulings. Ironically, alongside friction with China, ASEAN's dependence on China is growing at the same time for economic prosperity as well as for security. The 10 ASEAN states seem to speak out as a group, but individually, they all seem to want to avoid having to take sides between China and the US. It is interesting to note that China is the only major power directly involved in the code of conduct negotiations with ASEAN. Yet, what happens in the South China Sea is of direct consequence to the whole world. One suspects that ASEAN centrality could be exploited by China to dilute narratives in the Indo-Pacific, which could prove inimical to Chinese interests. In the Pacific, a new contestation pits US programs such as the BUILD Act, ARIA, and Asia Edge against the inducements offered by China to small island nations. Japan and Australia have also joined hands with the US in the Blue Dot Network and the Indo-Pacific Business Forum to promote infrastructure and connectivity. And India has also shown interest in this particular arrangement. This region is somewhat distant to India's individual interests, but yet India has been enhancing its presence in the Pacific Ocean through friendly port calls, participation in the RIMPAC exercises, and building a stronger partnership with Australia and New Zealand, the traditional powers in the South Pacific. My remarks would remain incomplete if I did not say something about the Quad. Personally, I have served in all the 4 Quad countries and in China. China's suspicions about both the Indo-Pacific and the Quad run deep. It views the Indo-Pacific concept as a direct threat to the BRI. China believes that trilateral and other dialogue structures involving the US, Japan, and India, and the US, Japan, and Australia are also aimed at strengthening the Quad, which it considers to be an Asian NATO. China can be expected to continue to use its old Weiqi mindset to view the Quad as encirclement of China. This is ironic since China has actively sought to use a Weiqi stratagem throughout history to buttonhole others in the region. In recent years, nuanced differences among the Quad countries seem to have narrowed down. The very fact that China no longer describes the Quad as ocean foam that would soon dissipate is testimony to the fact that the Quad is gradually acquiring traction. China would not have failed to note that it was India's decision that permitted the Quad to meet at the ministerial level last year. Again, it is movement in India's position that has permitted Australia to participate in the 2020 Malabar exercise. For long, China has taken it for granted that the Asia-Pacific is its oyster, with China its pearl. It does not have the same confidence about the Indo-Pacific, which is a broader, more egalitarian and more representative geography which recognizes the potential of India, Indonesia, and many others. In terms of next steps, there is scope, in my view, to convene a Quad meeting in the 2+2 format, with foreign and civilian defense officials participating alongside at the level of Directors General to begin with, and gradually elevating the dialogue to permanent secretary, that is Vice Minister level, and then moving on to the ministerial level. One should avoid calling the Quad a coalition of democracies, though, even if the 4 countries at the core are democracies. This would ensure a more comfortable fit with other countries at the periphery, such as Vietnam, that may not be democracies. After all, the Indo-Pacific region has all manner of political and economic systems. At the core, the focus of the Quad should remain on the strategic character of the grouping. At the periphery, the Quad should try and build a network of cooperation that takes into account pressing economic, developmental, and connectivity urges in the Indo-Pacific. In effect, I advocate a hard core and a softer and inclusive periphery for the Quad in the Quad Plus format. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very clear that an enduring security architecture for the 21st century will continue to be predicated on openness and transparency, rule of law, freedoms of navigation and overflight, and unimpeded commerce on the high seas. And I do believe that India's contribution to this evolving architecture will be of great and fundamental significance. Thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, for that splendid opening address, a very broad and comprehensive sweep touching on China's military adventurism, military ambitions, both old and new, and also a very strong focus on the present. Thank you very much. I would request you to kindly stay a while. I now have a great pleasure in inviting Admiral Sunil Lamba to deliver his keynote address. Admiral Sunil Lamba is chairman of the National Maritime Foundation, the former Chief of Naval Staff and chairman of the Chiefs of Staff Committee, an alumnus of the National Defence Academy, Khadakwasla, the Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, the College of Defence Management, Secunderabad, and the Royal College of Defence Studies in London. Admiral Sunil Lamba assumed command of the Indian Navy as the 23rd Chief of Naval Staff on 31st May 2016. He was appointed Chairman, Chiefs of Staff Committee on 31st December the same year. Admiral Lamba is a specialist in navigation and aircraft direction and has served as the Navigation and Operations Officer aboard several ships in both the Eastern and Western fleets of the Indian Navy. His sea tenures include the command of INS Kakinada, a specialized mine countermeasures vessel, INS Himgiri, an indigenous Leander-class frigate, INS Ranvijay, a Kashin-class destroyer, and INS Mumbai, an indigenous Delhi-class destroyer. He has also been the executive officer of the aircraft carrier INS Virat and the fleet operations officer of the Western Fleet. As the Chief of Staff of the Southern Naval Command, Admiral Lamba was responsible for the transformation of the training methodology for the future Indian Navy. He was thereafter appointed Flag Officer Sea Training and ushered a whole slew of measures to greatly enhance the battle effectiveness of Indian warships and rationalize their combat manning. As a Vice Admiral, he was the Chief of Staff of the Eastern Naval Command and thereafter took over as the Commandant of the prestigious National Defence College in New Delhi. Upon his appointment as the Chief Staff of the Naval Staff, upon his appointment as the Vice Chief of the Naval Staff, the Admiral streamlined the framework for transformation of the Navy's combat capabilities and infrastructure development. For his exceptional services to the nation, the President of the Republic of India has awarded Admiral Sunil Lamba the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal and then the Param Vishisht Seva Medal. It's a pleasure having you here, sir. Over to you. We look forward to listening to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nair, and thank you for that introduction. Ambassador Chinoy, Director General of Manor Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. Mr. Shashi Nair, Director, Press Institute of India. Commodore Vasan, Director C3S and the Regional Director of NMF in Tamil Nadu. Mr. Pratap Heblikar, Managing Trustee of ICSB, distinguished moderators, panelists and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, the Chennai Center for China Studies, and the Press Institute of India for inviting me today. It is indeed a privilege for me to address such a distinguished gathering, and I am confident that the topics and the themes selected for various sessions will cover a wide ambit of issues which serve to convey a far more thorough understanding of the diverse contours of maritime China. I think there is little dispute over the assertion that the world today is characterized by multi-layered and multifaceted diversity from political, demographic, economic, environmental, and strategic viewpoints. But why are these times so important from a strategic perspective? That is largely because everything around us seems to indicate that the world is in another period of historic transition. And therefore, I believe that it would be a fair assumption that we are indeed living through a period of strategic uncertainty, and the COVID pandemic has added a new dimension to it. As I see it, there are three global drivers which are of particular concern to us as they would shape our world and our collective future in profound ways. The implications of these drivers are broad and varied, and they will present us with tremendous opportunities as well as extremely dangerous risks which we need to mitigate. The first of these pertain to the ongoing shift in the technological center of gravity from west to east and the south. As a result, the technological superiority enjoyed by the west is under challenge from the east. In fact, the technological gap is narrowing between the west and the east, and in particular fields of advanced technology, many of which are military applications, where China is ahead of the rest of the world. Coupled with the technological drivers is the economic matrix. And by that I mean the ongoing rebalancing of global economies, which is leading to major shift in global economic clout. And this is clearly visible in the economic power which China exercises on a day-to-day basis. The next driver pertains to increasing world population and rising living standards. In addition to the social aspect, the growing military aspiration of China and its corresponding impact on quest for resources cannot be overemphasized. These factors are leading to a steep increase in demands of all resources, including food, water, energy, and rare earth materials. On the military front, as can be seen around us, this quest for gaining access and control over resources is manifesting itself particularly in the global commons, be it the ocean, the polar regions, space, or even the cyber world. And the third and last driver would be the impact of climate change, particularly from the prism of environmental, security, and economic aspects. Having spoken about drivers fueling the future global narrative, I would now share with you my views on the three important strategic trends which emerge out of these drivers, either as a direct outcome or an enmeshed output of more than one of them. First of these pertains to the ongoing power transition and diffusion. As the economic and technological power of China rises, it may rival that of the United States in the coming decade. And as the global power becomes more contested, it will be harder to forge internationally binding treaties, and non-compliance and subversion of international laws are likely to increase. And this is there in front of us, where China is a signatory to most of the international agreements, but then cherry picks them and blatantly violates them. Prime example is the UNCLOS. The next trend pertains to the potential of increased competition. And lastly, as a result of increasing competition, there is a wide scope of regional instability. Coming to the Indo-Pacific region, the geopolitical significance of the Indo-Pacific region has been growing in recent years for a number of economic, political, and other reasons. The region is home to 4 of the top 10 economies and emerged as the fastest growing economic region in the world. Riding on the wave of globalization, several countries of the region have emerged as global powerhouses in manufacturing as well as the service sector, contributing to about 60% of global GDP as in the past century. The economic resurgence of the region has raised the strategic competition amongst the regional and extra-regional powers. Transactional trade mechanisms invoking historical trade routes or vision of shared destiny have come to prominence among the established and emerging economies. The economic driver is shaping the political landscape of the region with far-reaching security and strategic implications for the regional and global order. The region is also home to the 10 largest standing armies in the world and 7 of the top 10 countries in terms of global military expenditure. The rising military power of the region has come to complicate the security calculus in a number of ways. The seaway of the Indo-Pacific hosts a major share of all international trade, hydrocarbon, bulk, and container. Importantly, about 80% of trade originating from here is actually extra-regional. In the Indian Ocean alone, 50% of global seaborne trade and 40% of world oil supply is carried over the international sea lanes by over 1 lakh ships each year. An unhindered flow of maritime trade to the Indo-Pacific region thus assumes tremendous significance for the entire world. The increased activity throughout the Indo-Pacific due to expanding regional and global trade in goods, ideas, people, and resources has raised a new set of maritime security challenges. The ongoing power transition and diffusion merits serious consideration. The balance of power in the future may not be as homogeneous as what we have witnessed in the past, but in fact may acquire different character and proportions at regional and sub-regional levels. The crucial question, therefore, is whether the current institution, mechanisms, and norms of international system can adapt to accommodating this shifting balance of power. If it cannot, disputes will be more difficult to resolve, and these could escalate into conflicts. The unique blend of strategized financial aid, which Ambassador Chinoy has mentioned, creeping territorial accretion, information operations, legal ambiguity, military assertiveness is being wielded by China to establish regional dominance. On multiple occasions over the last few years, instances of such assistance being offered for projects with suspect financial viability, limited local participation, and unequal benefit for recipients have come to light. The prime example is Hambantota. Some projects have also arguably been taken solely to support political and strategic design with almost no benefit to the local recipient or country. It is therefore necessary to establish an environment where multiple options are available to countries seeking financial assistance, allowing them to avoid getting entrapped by those with unscrupulous design. At the same time, realignment of national priorities in some countries, dilution of long-standing international arrangements, and changes in the global geo-economic balance has resulted in perceived change in the global order. The Indo-Pacific region has seen the most active and assertive manifestation of the strategic maneuvering which characterized such transition. China in particular has embarked on major geopolitical missions to gain influence in the region. In the political-military context, this has translated into concerted effort to establish capabilities which enable dominance over the region's shipping lanes and choke points. The contest of regional influence is manifesting into significant military buildup by regional as well as extra-regional powers in a bid to ensure and pursue their strategic interest. In particular, China's maritime buildup in the last few decades remains a serious cause of concern. The PLA modernization program appears to be proceeding at a rapid pace in consonance with the plan's stated intent to become a global navy by 2050. In the last 5 years, they have commissioned over 80 platforms, and majority of them being major platforms in the form of destroyers, frigates, and corvettes. Similarly, other countries in the region are making greater investment in acquiring modern warfighting capabilities across multiple domains. The collective impact of this enhanced maritime force buildup in the region would merit serious thought and consideration. The need for greater collaborative measures on maritime commons would remain fundamentally important in maintaining the strategic equilibrium of the Indo-Pacific, and here, in my view, is the importance of the Quad. The growing military aspiration of China, its corresponding impact on quest for resources, cannot be overemphasized. These factors are leading to a steep increase in demand of all resources, including food, water, energy, and rare earth materials, as I mentioned earlier. China's economic growth is leading to maritime dependency, and hence the focus on its maritime capacity and capability. China is meeting this burgeoning oil and commodity demands through a rapidly growing merchant fleet. Its influence on the global shipping market is substantial. It controls 20% of the world container fleet. The share of the construction of merchant shipping was 41% last year. And by 2030, Chinese companies are expected to own more than a quarter of global merchant fleets, ensuring a continuous supply of raw materials and delivery of its manufactured goods throughout the world. So carrying its goods and trades in Chinese flag bottoms is here. The insecurity of China vis-a-vis its slock is quite palpable. The maritime path followed by China can be seen in various defense white papers, the 2015 paper on military strategy, and the way it behaves in the real world. An analysis of 11 white papers, especially the paper on military strategy, endorses the fact that China's stance has been consistent in pursuit of maritime supremacy. China seeks a larger role for herself in the Indo-Pacific, and the world with emphasis on building itself as a maritime power, maintaining continuous presence in relevant sea areas, and taking actions to contribute to regional and global security through military presence and cooperation. The military cooperation is now becoming restricted to a few nations, notably Pakistan, North Korea, and perhaps Turkey. But she is a major arms supplier to a number of nations, including in our neighborhood. China seeks to equate itself to the United States and has named its principal threat as the United States, Japan, activities in the South China Sea by other nations, terrorist activities in East Turkmenistan, and separate tendencies in Tibet. However, we must also remember that the reunification of Taiwan will always be one of the major national interests after taking the first tasking of the PLA, which is to ensure the survival of the Communist Party of China. Hence the focus on local wars under informized conditions. In the maritime context, China would continue to pursue the policy of active defense by shaping a favorable strategic environment while maintaining deterrence and a defensive posture for conflict. China knows the importance of the seas and oceans for stability and development. Hence, we see a strong emphasis on guarding its maritime rights and interests, stocks, and overseas interests. Hence, China is looking beyond offshore water defense to open sea protection. To achieve this, China is striving to build its maritime power based on a combined or joint, multifunctional, and efficient combat force structure. This is evident from the reorganization of the PLA, especially the establishment of theater commands, the centrality of the Central Military Commission in the command and control chain, and the focus on developing a blue water navy with global reach. In the maritime domain, the PLA Navy will continue to maintain military presence in relevant sea areas with an emphasis on security of China's flocks. If we are to consider that holistic maritime security is the key to a stable, secure, and peaceful maritime environment, then there is a need for working together towards laying a bedrock of strong, holistic maritime security arrangements in the Indo-Pacific. We have seen that the inclusion of Australia in the Malabar exercise held recently and the Quad gaining center stage. Ambassador Chinoy spoke on length about the Quad. Like it or not, the Malabar series and the Quad will be symbiotically connected, and this is an aspect we need to accept and work on. As were elucidated by the Indian External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, during the second Quad ministerial meeting conducted last month in Tokyo, that advancing security and economic interests of all countries with having legitimate and vital interests in the Indo-Pacific remains a key priority. We therefore need to work together, carry the Indo-Pacific nations with us, and hence ensure a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific region under the gambit of a rule-based international order. The Quad and Quad Plus need to call out China on cherry-picking international agreements and rules and order and stand up for what they are meant to be. China will always be central to all discussions concerning the Indo-Pacific regional issues, whether it's freedom of navigation, code of conduct, lawfare, or aggressive posture and action. One solution is to limit or deny strategic space to China. Perhaps the time is right to look at Quad and beyond, and Ambassador Chinoy has suggested a way ahead. Working together will ensure denying strategic space to China while ensuring security and growth for all in the region, a sagar. The Indo-Pacific region is becoming widely recognized as the global center of gravity, as I said earlier, in terms of economic interaction, demographic, transnational security challenges, or the strategic balance. Unhindered flow of maritime trade through the Indo-Pacific region is one of the primary security concerns of majority of nations. From a maritime security perspective, the unprecedented development of the Indo-Pacific could not have been possible in an insulated environment. Regional critical role as the prime mover of global economic progress makes it strategically highly important agenda for regional as well as extra-regional powers. India has always supported the very essence of freedom of the seas, upheld its attributes as a global common. Implicit in India's policies and maritime strategy has been the desire for a free movement of people, goods, services, and investment across the region, security of slocks, freedom of navigation, availability of port infrastructure, non-discriminatory access to markets are some of the issues that ensure that from this definition of interests. In the end, I would like to thank the organizers for their effort in organizing this two-day virtual conference, which brings together experts belonging to diverse constituents of India's national power on one platform. I am sure that the rich deliberation will enlighten all of us on maritime China and the attendant risks, threats, and challenges. I look forward to the conference and wish all the participants all the very best. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral Sunil Lamba. A very interesting talk, I thought, at least from a common man's perspective. You spoke about China's economic heft driving its military, shall I say, aspirations and its assertiveness. regional dominance. You also spoke about an interesting aspect, drivers of the future global initiatives, as you called it. And you stressed that there will be greater maritime challenges in the days ahead as China continues to seek maritime supremacy. Thank you very much, Admiral. I now request Commodore Vasan to deliver the vote of thanks. Commodore?
Thank you, Shashi. I must first of all thank both Admiral Sunil Lamba and Ambassador Sujan Chinoy for accepting our invitation to be here. This is a wonderful day for all the three organizations who come together. This is not the first time that Chennai Center for China Studies, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bengaluru, and the Press Institute of India have come together. We started our journey together, initially starting with looking at the young scholars and journalists and media personnel who needed to be educated. But we moved on from there, and today we have our agenda includes a larger landscape. And today, of course, it was the maritime landscape that we are looking at. As far as both the speakers are concerned, I think they have treated us to a feast and have set the ball rolling in terms of the ensuing discussions that should take place in the spirit of trying to decipher China. Of course, in the three programs that we already concluded, including this one, we start off with trying to understand China in all its dimensions in our first webinar, which happened in September. The second one, of course, was specific to cybersecurity. We had experts from all over who are trying to decipher China in the cyber domain. We are also very lucky to have the National Security Advisors team who are dealing with cybersecurity. I'm looking at Lieutenant General Pant, who was here, and many others who are experts in their own domain. So this is the third one in the series, where we are specifically looking at the maritime domain and trying to understand what China's forays are and how we define the Indo-Pacific and the Indian Ocean and the challenges thereof. So from that point of view, I would like to extend my felicitations to both the speakers for this wonderful job that they have done. Coming to Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, who is the Director General of Manohar Parrikar Institute of IDSA. I know when he laid down his office in Japan, he kept me informed to say that he is returning to India. And I lost no time in inviting him to one of the events that the Chennai Center for China Studies and the National Maritime Foundation conducted here in Chennai. And thereafter, I've been in regular touch. And in fact, I went along with Ambassador Chinoy when he led the delegation to South Korea of researchers from India, where we had excellent interaction with various think tanks in South Korea. And some of those have reflected in the policy decisions of India. So thank you very much, sir, for laying this wonderful foundation for our discussions in the next 2 days. And we'll continue to keep bothering you in terms of getting first-hand inputs from you on various issues. Thank you so much. Now, Admiral Sunil Lamba is no stranger to all of us. Not only has he been the former Chief of Naval Staff, presently he's my boss as the Chairman of National Maritime Foundation, because I also wear another hat as the Regional Director of the National Maritime Foundation, Tamil Nadu. He came when the Navy has been in the forefront of indigenization. It has consolidated its maritime posturing and presence in different areas. And as was brought out by him, we have not lagged behind in ensuring that our maritime interests are served across oceans, not in the Pacific Ocean, not just in the Indian Ocean, but beyond oceans, as they say. So we realize fully in the Navy that it's the oceans that connect and it's the lands that divide. So I must again thank Admiral Sunil Lamba for graciously accepting this invitation and coming to be here with us today. And between the two of them, I must say that our job has been made simpler because the context has been defined. The contours of our discussions are something that we are very clear. And what the first-hand inputs that are provided by both of them, by virtue of their vast experience and expertise, is going to hold us in good stead in terms of our discussions. So I must also now thank others. First of all, our two partners, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, headed by Pratap Heblikar. We also have a naval officer there, Commodore Uday Rao. And then the team from ICSB, which includes Dr. Chengappa. And Shashi here, who has been, again, fully supportive of all that we do. And, he's never said no to any of our initiatives. And most importantly, the young team from all these three organizations who are keeping this going today. We had extensive meeting in the last 7 days because we are very worried about how NIVAR would affect this. So we have a contingency plan. As in the Navy or elsewhere, we are used to drawing up contingency plans or plan B, and our plan B is in place today. So in case the NIVAR disrupted us totally at Chennai, we are ready to take over from Bangalore and run the show. So I must thank the young team, which consists of Aishwarya, Bala, Anantalakshmi, Praveena, and Guru Prasad from PII, who have been working tirelessly to put this time together. Let me also extend my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers. Many of them are from the Navy, many of them are from National Maritime Foundation, many of them are from scientific institutions and universities. So it's my great pleasure, honor to acknowledge their presence here and thank them for what we are going to get from them in the next 2 days. Thank you so much for all of you. The number is closely touching 100, and that's a very good sign. And we are very happy to be organizing this. There'll be many more. The next one, which is going to happen next month, will focus totally on media, on which we'll again request your help to support us in this initiative to decipher China. Thank you, and thank you again to all of you for being here this morning. It's a cloudy morning in Chennai. It's a thunderous morning in Chennai, but the discussions will ensure that we see the light of the day. Jai Hind, Shamno Varuna.
Thank you very much.